So in this segment, we're going to be discussing again the Labour Party rejecting the EU's youth mobility scheme, and for all of those people who kept saying, "Oh, Labour are going to take us back into the EU," newsflash, they're not. So let's have a listen to what Yvette Cooper had to say about this.
Net migration is going to come down anyway. Can you see a point where you look at the numbers and you think, look, this is actually politically acceptable now to say, yes, Germany and France and Italy, let's
See, now, why did you go pick out those three countries? Germany. Let's go back over that.
now to say, yes, Germany and France and Italy, let's have
Germany, France, Italy. Why are you picking those specific nations? What about Poland or Croatia? It's a bit weird you picked out those three, especially considering those were a couple of the countries the UK initially wanted that mobility scheme with, just exclusively with like France over au pairs and stuff. That's something we've covered a lot on this channel, which I never thought I'd be talking about people who look after their kids so much.
let's have a youth mobility scheme so that young people can move between the UK and the EU.
We don't think this is the right approach. I
Ever?
understand. I understand
Ever?
that. I understand from the EU point of view, they see this in the
These are some of the goofiest looking mic covers I've ever seen.
context of free movement. But the UK voted.
Ever?
That I understand from the EU point of view, they see this in the context of free movement. But the UK voted to leave free movement.
Okay, so I think she's not wrong there. I think the UK do view it in the EU does view it in kind of a little bit in the context of free movement, the benefits of freedom of movement, of things like cultural exchange, that kind of idea. So she's not 100% wrong there. And the point of the UK left the EU for freedom of movement that was one of the key tenets of Brexit. Control of borders. I think that was the one that resonated with people the most. There is polling around people being more okay with freedom of movement, but really that's out of campaign season. When you look at Labour running on a campaign of cutting net migration, you can see that when you look at some of the major parties in the UK, they ran on campaigns of cutting net migration, and that's what ultimately they won on, in my opinion.
Are not going back into free movement in the same way that we've said.
What's being proposed, of course, they say is not free movement, but you're saying there is no way.
They are seeing this in the context of their free movement. And I understand that. That's for the EU to decide. But the UK has left free movement. We made a decision to do that. We're not going back into that. And we did make that very clear as part of the manifesto. So there's lots of other ways we can work.
So, for those people saying, it's a negotiating tactic or whatever from the UK, the main reason they don't want to accept this youth mobility scheme is Labour don't want to be seen as being the party that want to take us back into the EU. Definitely not at the moment, and let's not forget that they ran on a campaign on cutting net migration. So they know that if they do accept this youth mobility scheme, it's probably going to be politically toxic for them. This is not some negotiating ploy or some 4D chess move, as some people seem to think. This is Labour just being dumb, because ultimately this youth mobility scheme would benefit Britain. Last time I checked, there's still a lot of vacancies in the UK. In certain sectors especially, and so this youth mobility scheme would help. There is obviously the flip side of it, where you could get UK citizens moving to the EU to work there temporarily, but it's always a double-edged most of these things are kind of a double-edged sword in a sense, but key point being is Labour seem to view this youth mobility scheme in the context of freedom of movement, and that's one of the key problems. Looking at kind of the economic benefits of it, they would rather shun that because of the social aspect of it, of allowing more people to come here. So that's really where Labour stand on this issue. And if anyone has any evidence to say otherwise, I'd love to hear it. But all we're hearing is speculation and 4D chess moves and this and that, and of course the guys know what they're doing. He's a tactical genius, etc.
Really closely with the EU,
So if for
including
young people,
cooperation.
For young people, don't hold out any hope there's going to be any change to your ability to go.
We're trying to set up this new approach to the labour market, where you've got Skills England working really closely with the Migration Advisory Committee, working really closely with the Industrial Strategy Council, working really closely across the board to have a proper positive approach to how we support the labour market.
How you stay and work in the UK.
How we
it very much feels like the interviewer's got kids who may want to study or work abroad. That's what it feels like, the angle they're kind of pushing here. But the point is, Labour have talked about how they want to reform kind of the apprenticeship system and things like that, which are obviously I think the apprenticeship system in the UK is a complete joke, to be honest with you. And that's the angle Labour are going for, which is not the worst thing in the world. But again, saying no to this youth mobility scheme is, I think, in my opinion, very silly.
economy grow, how we make the economy grow successfully and don't simply depend continually on increasing overseas visas.
Oh, so hoping. I'm so glad she said that rather than saying cheap EU labour, because that's something Labour have said in the past. Cheap EU workers. And, when we look at the context of this, this is Lisa O'Carroll here saying EU diplomats have been spending months telling anyone who listens that a youth mobility scheme is not freedom of movement, need a visa, need funds, it's limited period, have to leave after. So it's partly an experience thing, it's partly a cultural exchange thing as well, but obviously Labour view it as, freedom of movement, or a part of freedom of movement, which I think is dumb. But ultimately, that's where Labour stand on this. And again, if you've got any evidence contrary to this, please feel free to throw it in the comments. If you think this is some 4D chess move for negotiations or whatever, let me know, because ultimately I think Labour don't want to scare off people who are anti-immigration or want to cut net immigration. I think they see that as a key voting area for them, and they're going to push to cut net immigration, despite the fact that they also ran it on a pro-growth manifesto. So, I don't know how we're going to get the workers in to fill the vacancies we have without, increasing immigration. Obviously, you can push people here domestically into these jobs if they're qualified for it, if the geography allows it. It depends on them. You don't want to be moving cross-country for, a basic job that doesn't pay much, because it's not economically viable for you. No one's going to do that. So ultimately, I don't understand this Labour strategy, but there's some political sense to it, maybe. But again, it's just people who are scared of racists, effectively, in my opinion. People that are scared to tackle the tough conversations around things like immigration. Instead of talking about how the UK needs immigration, they're more than happy to say, actually, we're going to cut the numbers, because politically that's easier to kind of push to the public, who are very blind on this issue. And rather than trying to educate the public on an issue, they're more than happy to side with the public despite their own stupidity. But anyways, I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what you think in the comments below. A like, comment, share, subscribe, support the channel on Patreon if you can, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.